Oh, thank God for joy. Thank God for laughter. I noticed as Allison was singing something that I hadn't noticed before, and that's one thing about Scripture and about the Hebrew stories and about the stories around the world in different tribes where they repeat them over and over in many faiths and cultures. And that is that they are alive and living, and they are active, and they become a part of our story as we read them and fall into them. And I just noticed that Elijah took his cloak and put it over his face and went to the mouth of the cave. What a timely thing to know that God in his beautiful and blessed Spirit is with us all the time, even when we have to mask up. You've noticed I'm preaching from a lawn chair today. I just spent a week at the Pinery. And it's twofold. One, I don't stand very well. I wobble a bit too much. And also, as I was driving back into the city from the Pinery of spending a week sitting in my lawn chair, I noticed that most of the lawn chairs on our lawns and on our porches and on our back decks and out on the sides of the road were empty. We don't sit in them, we buy them, but we wait for a time when we can rest. And I don't know whether it's our Western world that we feel like guilty when we are sitting here, but I want to encourage you. God brings us rest anytime, anywhere. So if you have a lawn chair, dust it off before October, and you have to put it away. So what frightens us about the dark? Anyone who's been camping knows that being in the great outdoors is a great way to come to grips with things that go bump in the night. During the day, you've braved the rocky trails and thrown your lot to the elements and the bugs. And you've lathered up with sunscreen, shocked your system by first donning a swimsuit that seems a lot tinier this year than last year, and plunged into a freezing cold lake, all for fun. You've tried to look dignified as you place tender feet on the burning sands for the 10-yard dash down to the shore from your beach towel, and I bet, like me, you've minced over the ever-present marble-sized pebbles with the grace of a penguin. Then lost your footing and plunged into the murky depths with an ice-cool summer splash. You emerge gasping and sputtering, for of course it's gone up your nose, but smiling and triumphant because you did it. Somewhere amidst the squeals and glee and shouts of the fellow bathers, you throw caution to the wind and you scoop out a few sandcastles with the kids. And now, you sit subdued, exhausted, sunburnt in places that only God knew you had, and staring mindlessly into the glowing embers of an evening's campfire. As night deepens and the day's battles slip away, you may muse a bit and calmly trade stories and jokes with those who share the flickering light with you in their lawn chairs. And you listen to their victories and losses of the day, and you toast old melancholy memories, and you freshen up new ones with laughter at your escapades. Then, from the darkness, a twig snaps behind the flickering shadows of the firelight, and a rustling in the bushes beyond grabs your attention like a vice. What's that? Someone fumbles for a flashlight, which you can't find now in the shadowy darkness. And finally, as the rustling grows to epic crashing and snuffling, the thin beam of the flashlight reveals the monster, the giant, the evil just beyond the glow of the fire. Two mischievous eyes peer at you from a masked, whiskered face. And two tiny paws clutch the marshmallow bag somebody left on the picnic table. Fear seeps away like a leaky tire. Indignation replaces flight, and mirth replaces monsters. And we smile and shake our heads. What were you so afraid of? The dark? The unknowing? Kind of like the loss of control of what's going on around us? Like this hidden COVID virus? Or maybe just the lack of light, of insight from our inner spirit who calms us from within. That center of our being where the being of all creation resides, in loving commune with us as a guide and a companion in the darkness and light of our journeys. As we live in these uncertain days during the pandemic, let's visit for a while from our lawn chair with a man who was very familiar with the unknown and fearful things in this world long ago. In our sacred story, we find Elijah sitting alone and in fear and in the dark. He was gripped with terror. Earlier in the week, he'd stood up for the truth of God's way, as Allison read, against the oppressive authority of King Ahab, whose Queen Jezebel had threatened him and wanted him run out of town for his resistance to the ruthless way that people were being ruled. Elijah's actions and scathing criticism of the corrupt activities of King Ahab's oppressive dictatorship wasn't welcome. And he had received death threats for speaking truth. This reminds me of a young girl who recently stood trembling in fear, yet courageously videotaped the untimely and violent death of George Floyd at the hands of a callous and uncaring person. Elijah's choices had led him up to a high pinnacle of glory on the mountaintop when fire had come down from heaven and consumed the pagan altars. But it ended in bloodshed as arrogance entered the battle. And Elijah's violent actions became more about his victory rather than reconciliation. And now he was exhausted and disheartened. Elijah was grappling with an unknowing and unseen loss of control of what was happening in his world. And his inner guiding light had grown dim. This light of life is deep within the holy part of each of us and placed there by the loving hand of our Creator. It's the light that whispers, "You are not alone. You matter. You can begin again." But like many of us who get overwhelmed by life's battles, we get unbalanced by the burning sands of a society that throws pebbles and pitfalls of confusing messages that getting ahead is all that matters. Elijah was a prophet, a wise seer. Every generation and tribe has them. These are elders who are inspired by the living spirit of life, and they can see the divine dance of God encircling the issues of the day. And they have a burning desire to warn others that what we do and say ripples out from us to others and ultimately affects this globe that we call home. It's a thankless and demanding job and sometimes isolates those who speak up for truth. They're often ostracized and misunderstood. John the Baptist came shouting, "Wake up, people, it's a new day." And he pointed his prophetic gaze at Jesus, who walked in grace and mercy and showed us what God, our Creator, is like. John eventually lost his life speaking truth about a gospel of peace. Well, Elijah had come to the end of himself, and he began to think that nothing he did mattered anymore. He was afraid and disillusioned and exhausted by burdens that were too great to bear. So he ran, and now he sits in a cold, dank cave of his own choosing, licking his wounds of self-doubt and fear and giving in to the dark demon of depression. Depression. It's just that. It's a depression. A darkened hole in the ground. And in my journey, I've learned that bringing the dark things out that we all struggle with at some point in our lives, if we bring them out into our life, it takes the fear out of them. It gives us a mirror to look at ourselves in a kinder way, and it sheds light on what we think is impossible. I love what Shelley said last week about the tattoo that she has on her arm. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And sometimes we think things are impossible, but Spirit lives. God lives. And I thank you, Shelley, for sharing that last week. Each day, we find out more about this coronavirus, how it acts and how it moves. Everywhere around the world, scientists are shedding light and dispelling our fear as we learn more about this dark foe. Have you ever been in a cave? Who's been in a cave? Anyone been in a cave? My dad was fascinated with them, and so we visited many. The Mammoth Caves in Kentucky are spectacular, with great halls of exquisitely formed chandeliers, and also with pillars of limestone. Beautiful when you can see them, but terrifying when you can't. And one time on our way through, it's a 3-mile trek down into the mountain, and it's a 3-mile hike back up. Our guide suddenly stopped us and turned off the lights. A velvet, all-encompassing darkness surrounded us like thick, cold soup. And frantically, I reached for my dad's hand, and he drew me close. But then I noticed something. Just up ahead, there was a rock. It began to glow with a greenish hue. As my eyes adjusted, the light grew stronger, and my fear subsided. The guide explained in a booming, now disembodied voice that this was a large stone that contained phosphorus, and it gathered illumination into its atoms when light was shone on it, and then it glowed softly in the dark to light up our surroundings. This calming effect and the shocking way it had been introduced to us reminds me of Elijah in his cave, keeping company only with his dark thoughts and his doubts swirling around him. The light of God had grown dim in his weary spirit. Outside, life was going on as usual, but for Elijah, winds of worry swirled past him, and he heard rumbles of ruthless rulers racing by on chariots to the next battle, and the flicker of fear was like fires nearby. To Elijah at that moment, life wasn't fair. Haven't we heard this lately, or even said to ourselves, "It's not fair. It's not fair that we can't visit our family. It's not fair that we can't go back to work. It's not fair that we have to work so much," if you're a frontliner. Life is so different now. This virus has made us fearful, with its elusive rustling in the bushes and the dark side to it. But we can learn, like Elijah, that the light still glows in our hearts, and our God still walks with us through these times. Oh, Elijah ranted for a while. We all do. But the mystery, the divine creator of every atom in this universe, is aware of our struggles, and God continually moves to bring light and life back into the dark places with her shining, abiding love. Jesus reminds us we aren't alone. We, and not just me, can be the lights in this world. We're never meant to go alone. Come, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, Jesus told his friends. The burden is never ours to bear alone. So Elijah rested. He rejuvenated his ragged, broken spirit. Have you found some rest these days when we've been tucked away in our homes during COVID? Elijah recalled that the loving presence of the one who calls us all simply to breathe and be. He sensed the glowing grace of God, that still small voice, flickering softly, came gently into his darkness and glowed with light and drew him to the mouth of his cave. And what did he hear? What we all hear if we listen. The voice that we know holds hope, holds help, holds us. The voice of the living God calling out our name. What are you doing, Elijah? Gently, Spirit draws us into the healing process of our own lives. When we speak of our suffering and pour out the pain, we drain the wound, and the healing begins and the light of hope pours in. We will find a way through this pandemic, and a vaccine will be found. Elijah crawled trembling out to see a new sunrise, listening to the whisper of God's love and remembering that he was with him. There will always be others who quietly follow the way of goodness and merciful kindness also. How many unseen frontliners are helping where they see the need? Like Elijah, I've found many willing hands to hold and to hold up as we do life together apart. And you will too. The divine spirit of life lives and moves and has her being entwined in each of us and always invites us to join the divine dance of wonder. And there are always new opportunities for growth and wholeness. So, who's wrestling just beyond the firelight and stealing your marshmallow bag? Get up and go see, right to the mouth of the cave, and look for the ever-glowing flame of love in this world. Listen for that still small voice of your Creator saying, I am here. I came to seek you out. We will get through this together. Amen.